This is an old song that was called Sweet Tramore. Teddy Barry was here one evening and Steve's a Millie, so we must stick in our song together here. And so we stuck this together anyway. There's a little spot that's dear to me wherever I may roam. Its memory stands out in my mind on land or raging foam. And if I had the chance again for to live my life all o'er, I would spend my days not too far away from my native home, Tramore. Oh, fare thee well to Knockanduff, to Fenner and Dunhill, to the lands that lie around Moonfie and Ballyscanlon Hill. Carrigavantry too, I must bid adieu, perhaps I'll see no more. And the other scenes that's so dear to me round my native home, Tramore. You know, it's where George Kent's is there now. That road along there, say go along there now for just over about half a mile. There was 4 powers there, including my father. And down the Liss Road, a little road off of that then, there was 4 people living there and 3 more powers. So that was 7 powers just in one little area.
And Phelan told me one day that there's a chemist shop, she was one of the Hogans. She said there were 56 people called Powers in the chemist shop. Yeah, because they were very good at those days, putting nicknames on people.
There was Denny Power, now he was called Denny Sean. Jack Power, Jack Matt, Tommy Matt's father. My father was John Power, so he became John the Miller. Down further then, there was Morris Power. He was called Morris Luke. Then to come back the other road I was talking about, down the short road, the Liss Road, where there was 4 people living and 3 more powers. There was Tom Power. They called him Tom the Liss because it was the Liss Road. And at the other side there was Tom Power. He was called Tom the Widower. Don't ask me how that happened. And you know the other people down further then. Willie Power, he was called Willie Buchel. Remember Billy Buchel, and that's where they came from. So that's the story about the powers up there in that area. Guess, isn't it? So it's extra 7 powers in one, and there's the extraordinary thing about it, none of them were related.
I remember when we were kids going to school, like not telling any stories like that. He says I'm telling everybody. But it was a place that you would meet girls. Go off, and then we used to go down walking with them down into the sandbars, the rabbit bars, just for a walk now, just to see the beautiful scenery down there. Sometimes you'd only make as far as the bunker, and you'd stay down there and you'd have a chat with the girl and see what was going on. But it's amazing the amount of people you'd meet coming up, and you're going down and you wouldn't know where to hide.
There's a kind of a little place down there, if you ever go down there, it's shrubbery and everything down there. They call it the Gurramugok's Garden.
That was a headless horseman used to ride up and down the beach.
And there was a little well down there, with fresh spring water coming up it, and the horses used to water there.
Oh, the old folks going back that time, they swear by it, used to see this fella going up and down on the horse.
Oh, to see again those happy times we spent in days of yore, or to dance again with my youthful friends upon my father's floor. Dull music by the fireside would fill your heart with joy, or to sing along with a good old song I learned when just a boy.
And then you had a chap called Matthews, Charlie Matthews, or not? He was a grocer, and beside him you had Joe Galeese, who was a sports shop.
It was on Main Street. It was tiny, and you had to go up steps to get to it. But inside he sold violins. So he must have sold other musical instruments.
Was one of the most colourful guys around the place, because he never hesitated. If any youngster was coming in, they might be coming in with nothing. They wouldn't have a penny to spend, but he'd show them everything that they asked about.
And he used to sell artists' equipment, you know, like sketch pads and crayons for writing and things like that. And he used to give art classes. I know some of my brothers went to the art classes.
And particularly as youngsters, Joe's shop fascinated everybody that went to films, went to the pictures and saw cowboy films, because he had all the guns that you'd see in the cowboy films, these Colt 45s and things like that. And if you went into Joe and you were talking to him about it, he'd take out a Colt 45 to show it to you.
Kitty whaling in lodges.
You've got
Kitty
one
would
there.
eat you.
She would eat you.
Oh yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Oh yeah. Everything had
Very
to
stern.
be just so, like, you know.
Yeah.
I
You'd be terrified going in if you
I
got to
remember my friend's mother sending us down for a loaf of bread, like, you know, and you were supposed to make sure it was fresh and all the rest of it. So of course we got the loaf, and one end had a crust on it, but the other end hadn't, to cut off from. And we started eating from the, you know, and we got up and our mother said, "No, that's not the one I wanted. You'll have to bring it back and get." The two of us were so upset, but we handed it in with the cross side towards her. She never noticed.
To walk along her streets again, it grieves my heart full sore. Or to stand alone upon the prom and view her mighty shore. I pray to God in heaven when my stay on earth is o'er, that he might lay me down in my native town, a place called sweet Tramore.
The railway was opened, not opened until 1853, and it was after that the town took off. So for the previous 50 or 60 years it was only a small collection of houses.
Tramore is still Tramore to me, except in that it's got so big.
But you take here West Town now, I wouldn't know half the people in the houses. They'd be new in, like, you know. They only come and go from work, you know. Whereas before, you visited each house, you grew up with them, and they all lived together. They all pulled together.
I think Tramore's come on a lot. You go down, I know the emphasis shifted from this road to the end of the prom. But the end of the prom is an exciting place, a lot of people in it.
The most difficult thing in the whole world is to slow down. It was easy to go to London and speed up, but to come back here and slow down, everything moved at a very slow pace then. It wouldn't be unusual for people to stop on Galway's Hill and have a 5-minute chat while everybody queued up behind them. Didn't see anything wrong with that.
I always liked that photograph, because it kind of tells the story of Tramore. Tramore in 1959, there was a population of about 2,500 in it. And every family in Tramore is probably nearly represented in that photo. I mean, when you could think of it, 1959, the Waterford to Tramore railway line was still running. The Rex Cinema was opened. We had 2 ballrooms. We had loads of shops.
We didn't have money. Nobody had money, but it didn't matter. You could enjoy yourself down on the beach, over at the cove, out the Metalman and that. I lived in Summerhill, and up around the corner was Peter Street. Now, a lot of them didn't have much, but they shared anything they had.
I loved the closeness of it.
You knew everybody, but the problem was everybody knew you, and if you did anything out of the way, the story was home before you.
But Tramore was always the home where I wanted to come to, because I came from a lovely street down in Talbot Street. All the neighbours were so beautiful and were in and out of each other's houses. And
you could get up on a nice summer's morning and go down for a swim and come back and have a bit of breakfast.
Every inlet and whatnot, they all had Irish names, you know, from Newtown Cove up to Cahirica the Colina Dove, the Doris Dove, the Licking, Trana Sukal, just down the strand underneath me there, you know. We knew them all, but...
Going back to the 1950s, very little food was imported, so which was nice in one way, in that you had seasons. You had the arrival of strawberries. This was a big occasion.
And in the winter, to be off on our day off hunting rabbits, and then you'd be playing a bit of soccer.
When the snow would come, or the ice, we used to have the skate down the whole length of Patrick Street, and you'd hop off a wall at the very end of it. Now, you wouldn't do it today with the traffic.
To be honest, we lived near the church, so we had quite a lot of fun around the church grounds and in the graveyard.
We'd characters in the town, Tom Connors. I remember Tom. Tom was an awful fella. He used to deliver the bread here. When we were young here, he could chuck you into the back of the van and bring you halfway to Fenner and let you out, you know. You'd have to walk home, but...
And there were so many families living on Main Street and Market Street that we were able to field a team in the street leagues, in the Gaelic, 15 players.
So many, like the Kellys in Queen Street, there was, how many of them? 12 or 13 of them. Do you know? Families were big in those days.
We had the good ones, which were a big help. Now there was 9 or 10 of them, so that boosted the numbers.
Our main playground was the road with a hurling and football on the street. And the guard would come along and steal our ball and hunt us off the street again.
There was the McGraths up the road, Patsy and Maura. There was Mary O'Connor, who lived in Patrick Street. She seemed to be minding us quite a bit.
I'll tell you where the mothers were. We had a seat outside our house, right? There was a kind of a little front to our house and a railing around it. And the sun always shone at the other side of the street. So first thing every morning, whoever was up first in the summer brought the seat across. And the wall we were at was known as Spencer's Wall, because Mrs. Spencer lived in the house there.
We had Guard Barry there and the Murrays, and we had the Forge, we had the Scouts Hall.
And the famous saying was, well, I'll throw that over Spencer's Wall. Everything we possessed, if we thought about it, was over Spencer's Wall.
When we were kids there, we used to go down after the Gully's eggs, and we couldn't get hen eggs at that time, so the Gully's eggs are the same thing.
The gentry would have been the Galways and the...
That's elite group.
Yes. What do you call them? Out from Anstown now. Anstown would have
Galloways.
been... The Galloways, yes.
But they were lovely people. Tommy Galway, you sing in the... We'd have concerts. Oh, they were fun. Down in the assembly rooms.
There was a drama society in Tramore at the time. Dermot Call was very
That's right,
involved,
Dermot Call was very good at it, yeah.
This was down in the assembly rooms, which was now known as the Bridge Club, on the top of Train Hill there. That's where the library was at the time.
As you came past the church, that was the end. There was nothing apart from a few cottages.
There was a woman up there, Dunphy, and she had chickens and that, and we just walked through her farm to get to the golf links, where it's all Tramore Heights, all those houses are built on it.
When you went down the main street and you turned left over Queen Street, halfway over Queen Street, there's an archway, a little arch door on the right, between all the houses. If you didn't know it, you wouldn't know it. It's a handball alley down there. One of the finest handball alleys at the time in Waterford anyway. All flagstones, a full glass, unbreakable glass back wall. We were very modern in those days.
And all of Peter Street, we'd come down and we'd all have the skipping rope.
You know, when those old games, how many people are going to go to your funeral? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, you know.
There was one particular game we used to play. It was known as Cut the Cabbage. Now, as you know, Tramore is full of hills. But where the carry-out is at the top of Main Street, you'd stand there back to back and somebody'd say, cut the cabbage, 1, 2, 3. So you ran in different directions. One went down Patrick Street, one went down Main Street, and they did the circle. And whoever got back to the starting place first won. Well, your tongue would be down there coming up those hills.
And Loveleen, where did that get its name from?
How do I'm not that old. I wasn't around when Brian Brew was, even though my grandson asked me, was I?
Love Lane was originally Hillquarter Road. That was, Hillquarter Road was on the water rates we used to pay then.
We were living number 1 Rivertown, right down at the sea. There'd be about 12 on the left and about 4 over on the other side, and that was about it. And some down the gap.
It was called the Gap by the old people. And people came there over all the years. They called it something terrace and this and that and the other thing. The only name that ever stuck to it was the Gap.
Well, Moors of Ocean View were there. They were kind of they had a guest house down there. And then there was Crowbally House. They were the Ambrose family.
There was a B.B. Ambrose used to live there, an old lady on her own. We used to be up there in the summer, up in the apple trees, scrumping, whatever you call it.
She used to come up the town on a bicycle. I think it had one pedal and one handlebar. But she used to make her way up. Very well liked woman now. They were Protestant people.
We'd be up in the trees eating the apples, and she'd be out around with the dogs. We'd be throwing down the crids at the dogs. But she never found us, or whether she knew we were there or not, she didn't mind anyway.
As a Catholic, you wouldn't be allowed to go to a Protestant church for whatever reason. It didn't matter what. Even to look in the door almost was taboo. But
when the bank was established here, up to the 1960s, either the manager was a Protestant and the teller was a Catholic, or vice versa.
But one thing I did do anyway was go to wakes. You know, if somebody died in the town, girl Nancy Murray and myself, we went to every wake because you get lemonade and a biscuit.
And the person, you never were afraid of dead people because you saw so many of them.
You know, somebody, you go in and you'd say your little prayer and you'd touch the person, and then out and you'd, they're good children, you know, coming and saying a prayer for Molly or whoever died, and they give us a glass of lemonade and a biscuit, and we'd be delighted.
Priests from other venues used to come and stay here further up the town, and they'd stay for a few months in the summer, and they'd have a side altar mass at maybe 9 o'clock, 9:30. Before the 10 o'clock mass, the official mass.
There was 3 or 4 side altars. So things were so busy in the summer with all the priests, altars would be going the whole time, you know.
So we used to try and get up and get a side altar. And then sometimes as you got a little bit older, you told your parents you got the side altar, but you were down in 5 minutes.
And when we were altar boys, we used to be up there, you know, we'd get a half a crown off of someone, you get nothing off others.
During the war, there was an allotment up where St. Patrick's graveyard is now. There was an allotment there that people went and grew their vegetables there.
My father
during
had
the war. Yeah, lots of people had plots there.
But then the council took it and it was being turned into a graveyard. And the first person to be buried there was a German soldier. His body was washed in on the Strand. Because I remember we were going down to look at him being carried up, and that there was one foot sticking out and very white. It's the one thing that struck me. The body, was white.
It was actually in a pub that the owner had died, and they had a wake, and naturally, being a pub, it went on and on and on. And the bell rang for the coffin to come, and no sign of them. The next minute, the parish priest came dashing down Main Street into the thing, caught the lid of the coffin, banged it on and said, "Out." It was going to go on for another few days, I'd say. It was a good one. No, but it was true. It was the Blue Lookout.
I was a small child. I was maybe about 6, maybe. And we were getting ready to go to Mass one Sunday morning. And I remember very clearly these 2 Spitfires crossing the bay there, chasing a German bomber.
I actually saw that German plane being shot down from the back window. We had a view straight out over the country. I was actually in bed, only a kid, and I heard all the noise going on. I ran to the landing window.
And they actually damaged it, and it had to crash land. I think it crash landed at Carriglan.
And your man came down then, gave it a salute and went up. The father ran up the stairs and told me, "Get down out of that window." There was bullets flying everywhere.
When the authorities came along looking to know, they asked the farmer, did he see any strange men in strange uniforms? Ah, yes, he said, inside happened their breakfast.
They were brought in for breakfast first in Charlie Powers. And then the guards came to arrest them. And they were sent to the Curragh for the duration of the war. My brother actually cycled out and came back with a bit of the plane. A tiny bit of it.
There was one man and his name was Well Held. And that's what he was known as, Well Held. And the reason he was called Well Held was there was no machines for cutting butter and cheese and ham. It all came in big blocks. And he'd be cutting it with the knife. And he'd always put out his hand like that and he'd say, Well Held. And that's how he got his name.
And he had cats in the window. And he had flour bags in the shop. White flour. And a black cat just jump around them. And she'd be white in a few minutes. And we just love all that excitement.
I think the first one that always pops into my head is O'Connor's up at the church, because as well as a shop, it was a bakery. And for anybody in Tramore who lived up around that way, the smell that used to come up from the shop at 5 o'clock in the morning when these guys would be up in there baking early in the morning, the smell was absolutely fantastic.
And then, oh yes, in the bakery, my father used to, when the knives would go bad in the bakery, he used to go across to the cemetery. There was a certain tombstone in the cemetery, and he was able to edge the knives out of the bakery on this stone. And that stone is still down there today.
And I think the L&N had a shop on the corner there, and Tessie Power had her little shop in Market Street, and Morris's had their coal yard.
Then there was Martin's down in the main street, which did everything from a needle to haystack, shoes, clothes, the whole lot. And it was Dermot Cahill worked in there, and that's where Cahill's shop comes up, because when they closed down, he opened up Cahill's. Even though it's Michael Clark hasn't, they were still called Cahill's.
Yes, there was a blacksmith in Main Street. Murray's blacksmith. The Forge. Oh yes, it's still called the Forge, but there's shops there now.
And we'd maybe get one sausage, but then she'd always throw in a wall of chips with it, you know.
Yeah, just a few
extra chips, and it was gorgeous.
Yeah.
They lived on Main Street, but they saw someone up around in Summer Hill who were cooking chips in a saucepan and selling them. And they must have been old or went out of the business, so they said, I wonder would this be a good idea. So they had rented a house down on Main Street, right beside where the shop was. And so they got a saucepan and cut up the potatoes, cooked them in the saucepan and started to sell them.
Yeah. And newspaper, of course. No such thing as these fancy boxes now. Newspaper, and you'd eat them. The thing was to eat them on walking up the street with the salt and vinegar.
And more helpers seemed to come along. We were all born upstairs. Nurse Minnie, who lived down the road, she delivered us all. And my mother, I suppose, took the day off when the event was happening, and the next day she just continued on. And the people around the street, there were a lot of people living on the street at that time. As a matter of fact, all the houses were full of families. And I'd say if we were writing our story at the moment, we'd say we were probably deprived of our parents, because it was all the neighbours who minded us.
And above that was a garage, a small garage. Halley's owned it, and a petrol pump. One of these petrol pumps that you wound the handle. There was no electricity on the thing.
And there was Flaherty's. There was a Flaherty shop in Market Street. Was a very settled shop. It would be for the gentry. They always had, the old people used to go in there, and you know, if you said, "Oh, I got that from Flaherty's," they say, "Oh, did you?" You know, that kind of, yeah. And there was two old sisters. They were spinsters. They ran that.
And then we had the book, that if they couldn't afford to pay the lot, well, they paid so much, and then every week they'd come in and pay something off.
You go in and get your groceries and you paid at the end of the week. You had your little book. Whatever you got was written down. You go in at the end of the week when you got paid, and You mark it off.
Now, things were hard, you say, and people hadn't enough money to feed their children. So that would be looked after, and then he'd be paid back.
Dorothy's shop was known as a source of income if it was blackberry season. You'd get a few pence for a jar of blackberry or a bucket or whatever you wanted to bring in. He'd weigh them up and pay you accordingly.
So you'd have your sweet gallon and you'd go off and you'd pick blackberries. But on the way down, we was come to this, I can still see it, a horse trough. I think it's still up on the top of Galway's Hill. I'd say that's the same one. And we used to scoop about 2 fists of water in on top of the blackberries to give them a bit of weight.
And you went in, you sold them to you got the money for the pictures, because you went to the pictures at every change.
And I have a feeling that we'd go down to Hughie Doherty to sell the blackberries, and I'd say he knew. Now, we wouldn't overdo it.
The Rex opened in 1945, and it was a state-of-the-art cinema, like I told you. But prior to that, in 1942, was the casino. And that's there where the holiday shops is now. Do you know where the holiday shops are? It was started life as the Palace Ballroom, and then it became the casino, and then it became the Silver Slipper Ballroom. You remember the Silver Slipper now, like, you know.
Actually, my grandfather brought the actual building from the Wembley exhibition. It was the first prefab thing to come into Ireland. So that's where the cinema was. And we used to be allowed to go on a Sunday afternoon to the matinee.
Tom Cooper ran that then from 1942 until 1948, and the Rex opened up in 1945, and that kind of was the death knell for the casino. Although down in the casino, the casino was regarded as the films were of a much better quality, much better films, and the last film shown there, they went out in a blaze of glory anyway. It was called In Old Chicago. It was about the Great Chicago Fire. And that was the last film that they showed there in 1948. So you can still see the old-fashioned kind of double-decker. And you can still see the billboard for the Rex Cinema.
Down there, and which is Carl's now, the Rex.
There was fierce consternation.
There was
there was the cheaper seats on the back
benches.
seats.
They weren't seats, actually.
Sorry,
they
the
were
benches put together.
Yeah, and then you had the plushie.
They were called the pit, wasn't it? And the pit, yeah, the flea pit.
Yeah.
You didn't go into the big seat, you went into the gods. That was the cool place to be. You had to be in there. And if you were a millionaire, it didn't make any difference. She went into the gods.
But the fellow that was the porter, he used to line mats up in front of the screen, and he'd be like that.
Down to the left as you walked in were the wooden benches, and up to the right were the plush seats.
But during the interval, there was on both sides of the aisles, it was a kind of, it was like a shutter. You could lift it up and down if you wanted to pass through from one end to the other. Well, you'd hear this every so often. The boys be slipping underneath from the hard seats into the soft seats.
All the chaps used to come in from the country, like, you know. They'd come from Fenner and all these places to the pictures. And they'd maybe go down to the Atlantic. And for sixpence, you could leave in a bicycle in Lenihan's. I think they used to leave them in the sitting room. Like, I don't know how they used to fit them all in, like, you know.
Mrs. Harewood had Jesus stuff. Bicycles, we used to keep them next door. Because often we hadn't our own bike going home, but you were there. We take the best one. There were no problem. No one had good bikes then. Linehan's shop, was it, I think?
But yeah, it's a famous place, like, you know, and Rocky Mills used to be there, and sometimes when the film would break down, we'd be all shouting, "We want our money back, we want our money back," and Rocky Mills would be called to go up to do a number while they were repairing the projectors. And Rocky would do his piece on the stage, like, I got a woman mean as she can be. I got a woman mean as she can be. Sometimes I think she's almost mean as me. Yeah. The black cat up, he died of fright, 'cause she crossed his path last night. I got a woman mean as she can be. Sometimes I think she's almost mean as me. Yeah. Sometimes I think she's almost mean as me.
Sometimes I think she's almost mean as me. Yeah.
Remember the Corpus Christi
procession?
Yes. The Corpus Christi procession, because Dad was in the Order of Malta.
Yes.
And this uniform would come down from the
to be dusted off
from the wardrobe,
great,
the back of the wardrobe.
Yeah,
It'd be in the back of the wardrobe, and in those days they had these camphor or the camphor, I think, little white things, and the smell in the kitchen of this uniform hanging up. It'd be aired like for a couple of days before.
I wanted to be a strewer. Do you know what a strewer is?
The flowers.
Yes, except I was too young because it was a particular year in school that were asked to be strewers.
We'd have to have petals.
That's right.
For the baskets to go in front of the host, you see, as it's going along.
I remember Mrs. Bohill used to go to her garden and she'd give me the petals and put it in. We had a little basket and we'd put what was it, Sacrament Most Holy, Sacrament Divine,
and kiss it then and
Say it again?
Sacrament Most Holy or Sacrament Divine, all praise and all thanksgiving be every moment thine. And we'd strew our petals, you know, for the Blessed Sacrament to come after us.
And going down Patrick Street, there was a big banner across Patrick Street. Welcome, my father used to say, welcome Jesus to Patrick Street. He probably didn't say that, but it was...
And we thought we were great.
Oh, we did. And all the visitors would be hanging out over the edge of the balcony in the Grand Hotel.
Yes.
Looking at us.
So our clothes during the war, my aunt used to make little skirts with little pinafore tops out of my father's old trousers for us. And then she'd put rick-rack bread on it to decorate it. So we thought we were gorgeous.
The tailors here, there was the two tailors here in Tramore, and they could work magic. If they got a woman's coat, they could reverse it, turn it into a boy's coat. And dear, you say to your brother, look at girl's coat you have on you. The women always managed. They helped each other.
But petrol was rationed then, like everything else. I mean, I remember the food being rationed. Tea and sugar and clothing was rationed.
You win with your coupon book. You get nothing without that.
And all our jumpers were re-knitted wool, you know. So if you got too small, you ripped it out and you re-knitted it again.
And I remember coming home from school one day and coming up Train Hill, round the corner into my house, and there was a crowd of people.
A mine was found on the beach, was washed in, and a man brought it up to the garage, John Reggie's garage. And there was copper and brass on this. The lads didn't know what it was.
And they thought he'll be able to open it. They put the blow lamp on the bomb and it blew up and blew them apart.
Actually, the owner of the garage was down in the pit under his car when it went off. He was all right. Actually, the relation of here, it was one of them killed.
Went to the Star of the Sea in Tramore. It was lovely, you know, small when we were growing up. The school actually itself is still there. It's Glór na Mara now, which is co-ed. In our day, they took the boys until they came to First Communion class.
With the nuns, they always picked on the children that had to walk 3 miles. I won't say poorer, they couldn't look a bit poorer than us, but anyway, that had to walk 3 miles to school. If they were a few minutes late or 5 minutes late, they got the leather. you know, in their hands.
Oh, everyone walked. Even the country girls came in. Some of them walked 2 and 3 miles, I'd say. But they would have, you know, some cup of tea or something the nuns would give them, you know, the ones that came that far.
Tough. There was one teacher, she was horrible. She used to smack us on the wrists with stick.
But I remember lots of them coming in their bare feet. I always wanted to go to school in my bare feet because I thought this was it, like, you know, when you were young.
Oh yeah, I went to school in the CBS. Yeah, I went to the convent first, like, you know, up to the Star of the Sea convent. And then we went across the road to the Christian Brothers.
The Christian Brothers ran a primary and secondary in the same building.
I think maybe the lads, maybe 10 years older than me at that, they were getting it hot and heavy. And I saw some of the lads getting things done to them, beatings with leathers, canes.
You got slaughtered. And I mean slaughtered. And, okay, I know, they taught you. People said that all they did was beat you up. They did teach you, but...
And he had this big board, kind of like a 4x2 lat. And in that you learn your arithmetic and all that, you know. Of course, when they come in the day, they'd all be gone for your mind. Then they say, come up, boys, and meet the Board of Education. You get a whack on the rear, you know.
There was one particular fella there, he was the headmaster, and he had a leather which didn't hurt you, but he thought it did. And the venom which he used to pull on you with that leather, thinking he hurt you, but you see he didn't, so you didn't mind. Jeez.
In that particular year, there were only about maybe 11 or 12 of us were in the actual, would have been going into the Leaving Cert. And they lost the Leaving Cert due to lack of numbers in Tramore. So we had to be put into the schools in Waterford, and we went to Waterpark.
By the time you got to the primary cert, which it was
Yes.
then, nearly half the class then disappeared. Yeah. They went off working in factories.
True.
Like we were
Yeah.
12 years of age.
Yeah.
And we got the opportunity to go to secondary school.
Yeah.
There was no secondary school at all in Tramore. So we had to go in and out on the train to Waterford.
We were the country people, would you believe it, from Tramore. It's hard to believe that now, isn't it? They used to make cocoa every day, the nuns, for the country children. So I used to get a cup of hot cocoa every day at lunchtime.
My dad rode a bike. He was, what was he, the
attendance.
At school attendance. He used to go off on the bike and he'd go to farms and say, well, Jimmy wasn't at school or what, and he'd say, get away, guard rice, I need that young fella.
At 13 I was taken out for a day. We had the canteen in Dunmore East, and the day they opened it, it was very busy. And my father came up to school and said to the teacher, Lynn will be back on Monday, and I'm still waiting on that Monday. So we had a very colourful life.
When we finished school that time, in with the farmer next door, next day you were tinning turnips or something, or making hay, or doing something with corn, doing something with cattle, and that was it.
When I was 16, my father said, right, he said, I wasn't asked what I want to do. I was to go down to the shop in the main street, and that's where I lived and worked up to the time I got married.
No, I quit school when I was about 12 or 13. In those days, like kids, there was nothing around any much for people unless you were kind of well off or you were the other way. So I was delivering milk before I go to school and milk after school. So then I got fed up of going to school. So I quit that and just went on the milk journeys the whole time.
Then in the mid to late 60s, Michal and I both gave up school and fell into the job. So we just continued on from that.
I should say most of the fellas I went to school with actually went to England. Unless some of them went on to secondary and done well, they got jobs around Ireland somewhere.
Now at that time there was a lot more work than there is now. You could get out of one job one day and go into another. But to earn serious money, we used to go across to England, work on building sites, nothing more than that. Work on building sites, send back a few quid to the mother every Friday in the post.
I went to England, back to England in 59 with the rest of Tramore. Because I remember standing in the cinema outside Shepherd's Bush, and there was 30 of us from Tramore in the queue, and a few more came in.
I used to pal around with Sean Smith down in Tramore, actually, John Dunn in West Town, and people like that. I used to always have a few bob, we'd go to the Isle of Man fishing, and we'd have a good few pound when we come back. Then I'd go on the cod for the winter with fellas from Dunmore, and you'd always have money, Money wasn't a problem at all.
And we were solid for the 3 months that we were there, just to earn enough money so that when you came home, you had plenty of money. And we did. We had loads and loads of money. And of course, we blew it in a week. And all saying, why did we come back? Why? We always came back and more. But there was loads of fellas like that.
I'd be fair sick some mornings, so that was the only thing with the drink and that. It wasn't so easy to get up at 4:30 and you'd have 12 or 14 pints the night before, I'm sure. We done it, a lot of fellas done it, It was a way of living. It's all different now, they're working inside in colleges and down there, soft seats and everything,
Fly me to the moon, let me play among the stars. Let me see what spring.
And over in the Silver Slipper, we had bands like Rory Gallagher, we had Phil Lynott with Thin Lizzy, we had Horselips.
That's the Silver Slipper ballroom. That was some kind of a children's party, But there's very few photographs of the Silver Slipper, unfortunately, in existence,
For lads, we said 10 years older than me, it was the Atlantic.
There'd be a few fellas. You see, what you would see is fellas being thrown out of the dance hall maybe, and they'd literally, like you see in the cowboy films, come out through the door.
In other words, please be true.
We had a great time dancing in the Atlantic Ballroom, Tramore.
And in those days, there used to be the big bands used to come to Tramore for the season, which would be July and August.
And I remember someone gave me a lift up where I could look in the window, and I saw the Royal Showman playing, and I just saw the people. There were so many people there. I said, "This is what close dancing means."
And there would be 2 sessions, one from 9 to 12 and one from 12 to 3. And we knew all the bands of the 60s, Dickie Rock, the Cadets, all of them.
So you'd have the holidaymakers at the first session, you'd have the locals at the second session.
In other words, hold my hand. In other words, darling.
My bedroom was down there. I'd hop out the window and over to Malloy's to meet them, and we'd go down. And that's where I met my husband. I was 16. Yeah.
At the time, I used to always say to my mother that I'd never meet my husband in the dance hall. Well, I've eaten my words since. But thank God, since then, I was the lucky woman.
In other words, I love you. In other words, in other words, in other words, I love you.
You know that phrase, we used that phrase 50, 60 years ago, down around. Where are you going? I'm going down around.
And the minute you got to the top of Trin Hill, you could hear the sounds of down around. The music would be blaring from loudspeakers.
You'd stand by the jukebox. You'd know all the words of the songs and everything.
And then each arcade had their own site. You had Dave Barry on one side, Wilf Dooley on the other side. Wilf's grandfather would be on the other side. Then you had the Atlantic Ballroom.
Pipers had 1 or 2 little hurdy-gurdy things, or the swinging boats were the great attraction.
So you got a go on the Amusements once a year, the end of the season. So that was it.
We never seemed to have any money, but we were able to we knew the people, or the people who owned the thing knew our parents, and they'd give us a free ride.
Even the Gypsy Rose, we had a fortune teller We thought she was very glamorous. She had a little caravan there.
We used to go down to Piper's Field. There was amusements in Piper's Field.
At the back of what used to be the Atlantic, that was known as Piper's Field. All their caravans were in there. They lived there all year round.
And with the amusements down here, a lot of families in Tramore got involved with the amusements, and our family was no different. My uncle Hughie worked for 50 odd years with Freddie Piper.
There was no such thing as not opening. The first year when my father and mother decided they were retiring, and they gave us this between the three of us to run it. The ASB used to go on strike July and August, and we had to make a living, so we had to open the place no matter what. And my mother and father were on the bus coming out from Waterford. They'd left the car in to be serviced, and there was 3 women in front of them, and one said to the other, "Are you going out to Wilf's?" And she said, "No, because the ESB is on the hours, like they won't." "Oh," they said, "no problem, Wilf is open. He took the roof off the Pongo and he has the car connected to blow up the balls." And my father said to my mother, "Well, if they have that much initiative, they're well able to run it." And that's what we did.
Yes, were you trying that?
I was a trial, but we were the only arcade open on the road.
That road way along there, all along there, that was called, the old times refer to it as Zoo Street. Because you had Turkey Road, Lion Terrace, you had a pub there on the corner run by the Monkey Power. Further up you had a pub run by the Cuckoo Murray. And across from there was Fox the Chemist, hence Zoo Street.
And when you went down towards the Deluxe, the first person you'd meet then was blind Lar Keown. He would be sitting on a box playing his accordion.
Lar would have his few bob, like, you know, and he'd be after playing, and you'd have to catch him by the hand and bring him up. He'd have his half one or whatever it is and go back down again, like, you know.
I think at that time we had characters, I mean real characters, the likes of we will never ever see again, definitely. We had an old guy called Limerick Bill, you may have heard of him in your travels.
He was a lovely man with children, as there were so many lovely old men in those days.
And there were 24 small little houses for older people and for people who didn't have anything.
And he lived up there, and the roofs were falling in and everything. They were called the poor houses.
And he was always very poorly dressed. He'd have a big, heavy overcoat and a soft hat.
But he was loved, and the old pipe he'd have at times.
Dudeen.
You know, Dudeen, yes.
And on Patrick's Day, or Palm Sunday, he used to wear a soft hat. Well, he'd have half a field of shamrock. And he always had things hanging off him, badges and...
I remember my mother, when I'd be going back to school or whoever, if there was something over, we'd bring up a dinner and give it to.
And he used to come to our house every Friday for his dinner.
You know, they were, that's what went on. Like, anyone that had a little bit more than anyone, they were there to call on.
Or you go and watch the hunt and follow it. With a load of children in the back. Yeah, it would start in Tramore down the Majestic. Or no, was it the Majestic? Yeah, it was always the Majestic. We'd go down, there's kids, and then we'd follow it up Galway's Hill and out. Yeah. Still is, isn't it?
St. Stephen's Day, yeah. Yeah, still, but it goes on down outside the Majestic. It used to be outside on Arcade Street, like, you know.
Oh.
And Jimmy Kane, he was the porter in the Grand Hotel. He used to bring out the stirrup cup.
And then on New Year's Eve then was another great night in Tramore. You'd be banging pots at 12 o'clock. My mother was great into that. Oh, she was always ready for this.
And at about 11:30 of a New Year's Eve night, they'd out with the accordions.
We had railings, and you'd have a fire shovel. You'd run up and down the railing with the fire shovel and blowing whistles and banging pots.
The same thing.
Everybody, yeah. Well, mostly number 4 Patrick Street, I can assure you. But everybody would come out. And it was great. We wishing Happy New Year, and then the band would drive down Pond Road.
All following them. We did every street in Tramore. You'd have about 30 or 40 people following them. And they did every street. And it finished up in the Grand Hotel Square, where you proceeded to have a dance. And I mean, I am talking about you wouldn't have a heel on your shoe by the time. They weren't roads then.
And there was always a dinner dance in the Grand Hotel.
And I remember they used to be looking out the window as much as to say, looking at the riffraff.
Of course, we had a very famous man here in Tramore, Nicky Whittle, you know, who was involved with the IRA in his time and fought down on Pickerstown, at the Pickerstown ambush down there.
I didn't realise, I don't know what age it was when I realised that we were different, our family was different. We used to have people who would be on their own. What you see here is my father. He would have been in his, he'd been in his 70s there, a fine looking man, but he must have been a very strong man to have survived 3 bullets.
And my mother used to say to us, don't give him a fright. And we wondered why. Well, he has a bullet near his heart and something might happen. And then the story would come out.
There was a few of the IRA down at the bank on Strand Road, and then there was a few of them on the Queen Street side, facing it. And out came 4 lorry loads of British soldiers, and to come down here, and they would have been caught here. The barricade was there, you see it? Someone just got nervous. Before they got fully into it, 1 shot was fired. And of course, the element of surprise was gone. Well, the story was that when the shooting started, he was at the shrine, and he was lying down with one of his Michael Wiley and Mikey McGrath, and next thing he felt something in his neck. He didn't realise it was a bullet, but anyway. Next thing, everything went chaotic then, shouting and shooting and everything. So then he got a second bullet in his spine, I think it was, near his spine. And he got a third one. And he was lying on the ground, and there was a British soldier beside him who had been shot. So he said he stayed still. He kept his eyes closed. And one of the British soldiers came up and said, I think he's done for. That was my father. And he said, he might be only shaman, he said. So he gave him a kick and he turned him over. So he didn't make a sound. He said he just didn't make a sound. Anyway, the next thing was, one of the IRA men, he thinks this was Mikey McGrath, shouted something, you come on the rebels or something, and drew away the soldiers, and they followed him, and actually they caught him and gave him an awful death. They beat him to death, that chap. But they moved away from where Daddy was. So he realised he was on his own then, with Michael Wiley. So he turned around and crawled over to the ditch and eventually got over the ditch and down into the field, which is there today.
Oh, sure, the cockles were beautiful, yeah. Sure, I often picked them myself then when we'd be going to the sandhills as very small children. I remember going down to the sandhills with my aunts and picking cockles on the way. But I love them. I still love them.
A lot of them are seasonal. People only come down in the summertime. But I like coming down in the winter time, that it's nice and there's no one around and it's nice and quiet. Yeah. And you can see the different geese and the different birds that are coming. It's just, the place is totally different in the winter towards the summer. There's another nice one, yeah.
Here, come out, dogs.
Do anyone want to taste one? Huh?
You won't get them any fresher. Just spread it out to be kind of fairly okay.
The sea can be wild here at times, you know.
Oh, there was hundreds of shipwrecks in the bay. There's something like 200 shipwrecks altogether.
That's where we'd be used to be fishing often now, like, you know, because the fish would hang around the wrecks and that, like, you know, and the father knew the majority of them, you know.
You've heard of the metal man? You have to hop around him 3 times to get married. I can assure you I never hopped around. It was all broken stones underneath. You couldn't hop.
The metal man was always there because he was for danger. Tramore was danger, and the 2 piers are for the entrance to a harbour. And when you're out at sea, both of them are like that. They're headlands. You only see the headland, and the 2 piers then bring into Waterford harbour.
My grandfather used to tell me lots of stories, as gardens as he used to call them. And one of them was about the seahorse. And he told me that if you came out to Tramore on a stormy night, you could still hear the voices of the women and children screaming. And in that mixture of voices, you could hear another voice saying, keep away, keep away, keep away from me, for I am the rocks of misery.
I remember Jack telling me, you know, he was 90 at the time, and he telling me, they said they put that up after the seahorse, you know, the metal man for danger, you know, and the 2 piers for the entrance to the harbour. Jack said, that, he said, you know, in the old days, he said he used to light the fire on the headland, he said, to guide the sailing ship into the harbour, he said, you know, and the locals used to light it on this one, he said, and they'd go into Tramore Bay, he said, and they'd loot the ship then, he said, oh, like that, he said. That was only an excuse to build them, he said,
human life wouldn't have been as sacred as it is today, but what would have worried them was the tonnage of shipping that was being lost in the bay.
And the fact is that there was 3 transport ships left England bringing troops over to Cork. 3 of them sunk. One of those ships was a Seahorse.
Spent the morning under Brownstown. The anchor is dragged, and because of the ferocity of the storm, and he had absolutely no control of the ship came in and hit the beach at approximately this location, maybe a half a mile out. From the Doneraile area, we have reports of people looking at red dots on the beach coming in. They were the soldiers in full uniform that had died.
Eamon Matthews and myself started doing life saving, and we used to swim from the pier to the shore, to the beach, and of course doing that often enough we came to the attention of the lifeguards, and they had this big primitive sort of 15-foot wooden board, and as we got to know them they gave us a go on this thing. This guy Kevin Cavey came down from Dublin. He was just back from Hawaii and California, and he brought a couple of boards down and he left them at the lifeguards for the week and went to see how we got on, and sure, the surfboards never came out of the water for the week. In 1967 he decided to run the Irish surfing championships in Tramore, and so nobody knew how it was going to work out, but people came from all over the country, and sort of friends we made that day have remained friends ever since. You know, it was just a great event. I can remember us all out surfing during race week in Tramore, and of course there was a big crowd lined up along the promenade, and we used to surf out in front of that, and their whole idea was to watch us fall off, and the whole place would erupt with laughter every time somebody fell off, and we were just trying to stay on. They were waiting to see would we fall off. You know, it's just funny. Yeah. The incredible wave, it was a wave that I reckoned should exist because it's a big long sandbank coming out from the sand dunes next to the Rhine Shark, and it's a big strong current there, so it was tradition had it that was very, very dangerous because it was a huge current, and so I went down there several times and it was always rubbish, but then one day I went down and it was absolutely fantastic. It was like being in Indonesia or one of these places with just light winds and this perfect wave coming in and sort of breaking over, cracking along the shore, and just the perfection was unbelievable. And I came home and people were asking me about it, and I just said, incredible. That's all I could say. I couldn't really talk for 3 days, just so good. And so it became known as the Incredible Wave.
We spent, I'd say, all of our school days and into our youth down on that beach. I mean, I can remember going down there at about 8:30, 9 o'clock in the morning, meeting a few of the lads, calling to the guy who had the football.
We did play officially for Tramore at various levels, age groups, but the real thing was the game on the strand. Could be 20 a side, and the way it was done was everybody who arrived, usually about 11:15, I usually had the ball because I was the nearest to the strand, so the lads would come and collect it if I couldn't go down. And you'd line up against the prom wall at the men's slip, and the team would be picked by two maybe more senior fellas who were playing on the senior team. And down with the goalpost, either a jumper, a trousers or whatever, or the sand in a, build it up like a castle.
We could be down on that beach from 10 o'clock in the morning playing football. Several times we'd break up, go out for a swim.
Out in the tide then, a number of the lads would go out in their jeans because they wouldn't have any togs with them and lie on the men's slip, dry out in this type of weather.
Come back in, play again. It might be 7 or 8 o'clock in the evening when I'd be getting home. Absolutely burned out, but happy.
We'll say you might be playing in the afternoon for Tramore in an official match, and you were questioned as to how you were absolutely banjacks by the time it came to 3 o'clock.
And I remember there was a great saying around, especially among the lads in Waterford. We used to go in and play them then in league matches inside in Waterford on pitches. And they'd say, go away, you're only a strand footballer. Couldn't put a pair of boots on us, we weren't that great.
Down Strand Street, on the left-hand side, after Palace Square, Don Stickyback, Don and his father and his sisters, they lived afterwards down in Ballinatton on a small holding overlooking the back strand. And they used to call it Don Stickyback's Ranch. And he had 10,000 acres when the tide was out and about a quarter of an acre when the tide was in.
Used to take photographs all the summer on the pier, on the strand, on the pram. And that you could go, then you go in and you pick out whichever one you wanted.
The Powers were pioneers in photography in Tramore, right? And how the name was, if you got a photograph, they gave you a kind of an adhesive to put onto the back of it to make it sticky.
Yeah.
And you stuck it into the album then.
Oh, okay.
And that's where the name Stickyback used to come from.
At the end of the 18th century, 1770s, 80s, it became fashionable for the first time ever to go and sea bathe. The king at the time, George III, led this fashion, and then all sorts of fashionable people did, and they built themselves seaside huts.
And would you remember the bathing boxes?
Oh, absolutely. And Mam Doll. Yes, Mam Doll was a wonderful person. She was Mam Doll Chapman. They were an O'Connor family that lived down in Queen Street where we were living.
And the mothers would go to the women's slip with the children, and the fathers went to the men's slip. So the fathers had a grand time relaxing, and the mothers were left minding the 6 children.
Mam Doll was in charge of the ladies' slip. And if by chance a man happened to come down that slip, by God, he got it. He got his comeuppance. So she'd clear him off.
And these are the bathing boxes?
They're the bathing boxes, yeah.
And look at how unbuilt up Tramore is there.
Yeah.
I think my picture of them is with black shawls around them anyway. And they used to hire out these bathing boxes, and they were on 2 wheels, 2 big wheels and a handle, 2 big handles, and they wheeled them out to the edge of the water.
And the person got changed in the bathing box and stepped out and into the water. It was all very discreet and back in again.
She was out for her swim and she was changing into her swimming costume in her bathing box, and a car came screaming down the slip at a time when there were very few cars around anyway, but the car lost control and crashed into Granny's bathing box, and as my father described it, grandmother and bathing box went sailing up into the air and then turned down and landed head foot in the sand. I thought this was hysterically funny, but he said she actually was damaged in a way that hurt her all of her life.
There was, Morrissey's had bats, seaweed bats there. Now, they were really gone by the time we were. But they also, seemingly, you could have a seaweed shower as well. But they tell the story now to someone that was related to him told me that this woman went in for her shower and she was waiting and there was nothing happening. She was standing there and the next minute a voice from on high came, "Would you stand a little bit east, ma'am? I can't get at you." He used to throw the bucket of seaweed water down for her. That was the shower.
My memories would be, we'll say, of the early 60s, where everything was concentrated on the strand, swimming. And then you progressed eventually after your family, you were growing up a little bit, maybe 14, 15, and you were supposed to go then to the pier. The pier was the next progression.
And that's the place where all the boys and girls hung out?
Exactly, yeah. Where you learn to swim.
And would you learn more than that?
No. It was so good. We were real goody-goodies.
And then after that, then Newtown Cove and the Gillamine. And if you swam on the strand when you were 15 or 16, you weren't regarded as a swimmer. You were still with your family, in other words, yeah.
And as we got bigger, then we had bikes and we had more freedom as we kind of came into our early teenage years. And then we used to go over to Newtown Cove and the Gillamine.
Right, the Christian Brothers were supposed to have started the Gillamine there shortly after they came to Tramore in 1867. They were supposed to be the first people to swim out of the Gillamine. But there's very little history about the Gillamine.
Now, they had the swimming classes in the pier, so it was quite safe for everyone to go there.
My parents couldn't afford to get swimming lessons. There was a man called Justin O'Mahony, and he was the swimming instructor. And I would sit on the top of the pier and watch what he was teaching the kids. So anyway, that was grand, and there was the first steps, the middle steps and the deep steps, and now you were a fantastic swimmer if you
went
could go at the end step.
And you know, from swimming every day, and I was as brown as a berry, and I remember two girls from Waterford coming out, and one said to the other, "Look at her, wait till you see that'll all wash off her when she gets into the water."
But that's exactly why this is to this day known as the pier, because you only had one wall going on. The northern wall was added later because of the wash of the Doneraile Cliffs, with it washing straight in. Technically speaking, it's a harbour now, not a pier, but you'll be corrected quite often if you call it a harbour. This pier was supposed to be at Newtown Cove originally and not Lady Elizabeth Cove, but the reason it's here is because the fishermen protested and said that Newtown Cove was too far for them to travel to. There's some things about this pier that people may not even realise, such as the stones on the quayside. And those stones were put there for the horses to get a grip when they're drawing the boats or drawing the fish. You have two nice tracks for the cart to run on, and then you had a small path up the middle for the horse to get a grip on.
The Kileys lived down there. They were fisher people, and the O'Briens, all those cottages coming down, they sell the fish at the door, at the mackerel and that in season. Yeah.
Yeah, we gave a lifetime out there, you know, although I never wished to go out there again. I fell out of the boat twice out there, and the father pulled me back in by the head of hair, and none of the two of us could swim.
There was a couple of boats that would regularly come to the beach and sell mackerel wrapped up in newspaper.
Sure, look at the stocks are there, but they don't be there for long. They just come now and they don't stay. At one time, you'd have the shacks out there in April and they'd be basking in the sun. And now you don't see heaps of them, you see a couple of them, and they're gone. But the mackerel now, you have to get out in the morning at 4 o'clock to get mackerel now, or you won't get them. One time you could go out any time and get them, get a box of them or 2 of them. You wouldn't want any more then, like, because everyone would have them.
He went into Croaks this day and he was out fishing, and there was this Dublin woman was in there and the husband, Joe. And they said, "Well, Mickey, were you fishing today?" "God," he said, I was. "And did you catch many?" He said, "I had a good old day," he said. 99 of them I caught. And they were quoting us for a while, a woman turned and she said, "Jesus," she said, "would you not have rounded off?" I said, 100. "I wouldn't tell a lie for 1 mackerel," he said. "Oh, we always tell the lies."
Hydro was a state-of-the-art building in its time, like, you know.
And they were sea baths. People used to come to Tramore to go for a bath, and the water used to come in from the sea.
But there was a pitch and putt club started here in 1947 in Tramore, and that's where they started down there. There was an old bog that was after being drained.
The first venture was the sandhills in Tramore, and then the tide came in and tore some of the hoses apart.
Mr. O'Sullivan, my father-in-law, brought a greenkeeper and somebody else over to Scotland, I think, to see the layout of the courses over there before they designed the course here in Tramore.
This was a snipe bog, well, before it was golf. Just a big bog.
We have a great course here, and we have a great comradeship in the club, you know, and a great social. You know, the women here, you never feel about, you come up here even on your own and you could sit and read the papers. I'd have no qualms as a woman coming in here. There's always somebody behind the bar that's friendly, a friendly face, you know.
There was, going back years ago, a big divide. The ordinary working man wouldn't be left inside that place up there.
We had great fun. We came in here and caddied, make pocket money. Usually you start off that way, then you get a love for the game.
Any fella that played pitch and putt to a reasonable standard always became a pretty useful golfer.
We had the famous Rooney here. He was a caddy. He kept us all in tow and taught us all how to caddy, taught us all how to play golf.
Even playing snooker. I see him bending a ball around another one 50 years ago.
When I used to go up every Friday night to practice, and he'd give me a bit of a lesson. And he was a bit deaf, and he'd be...
He had a lot of sign language as Rooney. He'd be telling you to keep your shoulder right and do things like that, you know.
But my 2 sons used to come up then, and we used to practice where there was a bit of open greenery. We'd off the 12th tee, which there was a big a forest between the 9th and that bit. And he said to my sons, he says, "Your father's after hitting balls in there and they'll never be found."
When we were kids, we played hurling and football. It kept us occupied.
The GAA in Tramore was very, very strong. There's early men, you had the population, you had people interested, but it's gone downhill in the last 6 to 8 years. Very much so, very much so. And it's hard to put a finger on it, but I mean, it's so cosmopolitan here. You don't have the dyed-in-the-wool parochial attitude to a team as you would have out in the country.
Tramore, Dunhill and Fenner. I can remember Canon Coffey telling us to behave ourselves going out to play off the pulpit, going out to play against Fenner or Dunhill, I can't remember which.
Well, seemingly there was road building here. It would have been at the start of the 1900s. There was road building here, and there was road building in Portlaw. But the club itself is only formed with 10 years maybe. But we'd have to have some famous bowlers down here too, like. We had Coppinger, we had Mackett, Kings of the Roads, and that, like. They're serious men, like.
Okay, Pat, you work away there. Tell us about this.
Yeah, this is an old photograph in the silver slipper ballroom in Tramore.
This is the first band we had. My brother John is on the left on bass. Michael Kent, rhythm.
That's him there?
That's him with the sunglasses, shades. Mike Kent, rhythm guitar there.
On rhythm?
Yeah. Dave Kent in the back on drums. And myself there on the right. But we were quite big ourselves then, because we started up. We were the first rock band in Tramore.
What was your name, the band?
We were called Alive. That's all we did. Alive. We did all heavies of.
They used to print the cards of the bands, so we used to collect those.
And would you all have to have your own autograph then?
Oh yeah. Actually, the first time, this is Croke's par. The first time Rocky came in here, to old Mrs. Croke, she said, "Oh, welcome. And what's your name now?" He said, "Tom Mills." "And the Toddy Mills." She said, "I'm his son." "Oh, you're welcome as the flower to me." So Rocky had a few drinks. At the end of the night then, he started off 11 and jumped up on the counter. She said, "Get out of here, you're barred for life." And he was welcome as the flower to me.
I've been in pubs all over the place. Nothing has ever compared to the Vic. This is the old Vic when Pauline Hendry had it.
Well, I'll be totally honest with you. At that time, in my early days, I didn't drink really much. Drink wasn't of any importance at all. I didn't really drink.
To explain her to you, she always wore the old apron. She had jet black hair. Her hair was jet black. Always had the apron. Always had a cigarette in her mouth. The fag ash hanging down of her mouth. Even when she'd be pulling the point, that fag was there. It was just part and part of Pauline. And Pauline ran that for years and years as a guest house and a pub.
We used to go up 2 years ago when Sadie's pub above Robinson's, just above us here.
Back then you went out and people would talk about you if you were drunk, yeah. It was nearly a sin if you were drunk, like.
You could go in at 10:30 in the morning and there'd be a line of fellas along the counter, a cigarette in one hand, a pint in the other hand, and the paper out in front, reading the paper, all sitting along the counter, yeah.
And then there was the halfway house, Katie Riley's. I went there once and I asked her to go to the toilet, and he wumps out the door there, and I went out, it was a field. I was looking sneered, I came back in there, I said, "Sorry, where's the toilet?" She said, "You were out."
It's the old forge now, but it used to be George Connolly's, a very, very well-known man in Tramore. And all the guys from Waterford used to come out every Saturday night to watch Match of the Day.
Oh, stop. I mean, they wouldn't even look at what we used to look at then, you know. Could be coming and going, spots. But a lot of the time, we had nothing else, you see, you know.
Even as youngsters, when I say youngsters now, maybe of, 16, 17, 18, we'd walk to Rockets.
The thrill was to see how much you could improve it by increasing aerial sizes, different types of amplifiers. That was a big, big thing.
Kathleen Rocket and Tony, they were smallish, The till was high. If you give them a tenner, you could be quarter of an hour waiting for the money. They'd be standing up on their toes and they'd be looking in and they'd be trying to feel the money. They couldn't see it. Jesus, they were tough at the time.
I remember back in the 60s, the cars were all the way down to nearly our house, down in the bottom of Westtown.
The crack up there was be out on the road singing, dancing, and the food up there. Mrs. Rocket was a gem, an absolute gem. She was a great woman.
On where the pitch and putt is now, they used to keep cattle there, and back in those days, all the slops of the drink used to be gathered up in the morning, and they used to feed it to the cattle with the grain. And often you'd see the cows going down the road and they'd be staggering, The only one that'd be standing straight was Richard going down, hunting them down. I can still see him putting his hand on them. "Come on, Betsy, come on." And he tapping them down the road.
But I do know that the Lux Hotel was a very popular spot, and the Ritz here was a popular spot.
Go on, tell us.
Yeah. The story of the Ritz is the man Reynolds owned it at the time. And he had so many writs against from the court that he was pinning them up on the wall and up on the ceiling. And that's how it got the name of the Ritz. Actually, my father, during the war, there was no cars, and he used to in and out on the train. And he was always late, so he used to cycle down. He was cycling down Train Hill when the brakes failed. And he shot across into the station, banged his head off the train. And one of his pals looked out and he says, "Oh God, Ned," he said, "if you told us you were in that big a hurry, we'd have opened the door for you."
Ash, the train was great. We spent our time putting our heads out the window and getting soots in our eyes and all that sort of thing, you know.
You know, it was steam engine.
I remember the first day the diesel went on the line, and I had a monthly ticket because I was going to the Tech. I got on the diesel train, I stayed on it all day.
Because as soon as the train would leave the station below, they just go from carriage to carriage on the outside. It was no bother to them.
And then your man, poor old Johnny Corcoran, he used to do the 5-minute bell. He'd ring the bell. He'd see you at the top of the hill and he'd ring the bell, you see, 5 minutes. And he'd close the door.
Close the door if he saw you halfway down Train Hill and ring the middle bell.
Yeah.
But sometimes he'd relent and let you in.
And there was poor Mr. Higgins. Do you remember him?
Yes, across the road.
And he used to come out with his briefcase and his Anthony Eden hat, you see. And he'd be walking down behind us, and we'd all be walking for the train. And we used to get to the top of Train Hill, you see. And we'd look like this, you see. And then we'd make the run, you see. And we'd stop. And he'd come hearing around the corner as he thought the gates were closed. Oh dear, when I think of it.
I remember my father one night at home saying to me, "Sue," he said, "you know, I've got to pay money to the railway company." I said, "Why, Daddy? What do you want? Why?" Because he said, "The carriage I was sitting in today was full of your name. You know, in those days it was only upholstery to there, and then it was wooden. And they'd have my name and Jackie Welsh was his name, the fellow from the water park. And Jackie and Love Sue. It was written all over the carriage, and he told me he'd have to pay. I was mortified.
Oh yeah, I do remember going into Waterford, and I remember actually I was only a young man, and I was 47, I think. I was only 3 or 4 when the train came through the wall at the Lux. The engine came through the wall out onto the road. You remember that? You didn't see that?
And I remember my older brother bringing me down on the bar of his bike to see it.
And you see, it goes back to, way back the 1700s, coming to Tramore for their health. So people used to rent out a house for maybe a month during the summer, and they come back to the same houses. And that. So people, if they had anything spare, that was one way you could rent your house out.
When people came to Tramore, they tended to come for a week. There was no such thing as a day trip, because one of the main reasons being there was no car.
The same people come the same month every year, even, you know.
Huge numbers of houses in the town ran bed and breakfast. They might have a single room, they might have a couple of rooms.
They used to rent out their houses, and they used to move into a lot of them moved into their garages. They'd done up the garages a bit to make them habitable.
Yeah, because actually during race week they'd be coming knocking at everyone's door. It didn't matter to know, could you have a bed for the night.
Yeah.
You know, because the hotels were full.
Yeah.
Towards the end of the season, a lot of farmers came, because when the harvest was over, they came to stay, and they brought their families with them.
I think it was Dunans, they used to call them. They were the farmers that came in after the harvest, came to Tramore, and their thing was they'd knock on the door and ask the person, "Would you sleep us? We'll eat ourselves." What they used to do was bring their own food
and cook it,
and get the landlady or whoever to cook it, but they'd have their own food.
So 15th of August, 15th of Ireland, they used to call it here. Yeah, that was a busy day, all the relatives, all my mother's cousins and brothers would come here. The Deluxe down there now, and the public bar and the Deluxe and all the books, they used to run out and drink. And Sullivan's used to have a kind of a shuttle service coming out from all crates of beer, all through. The pubs used to close maybe about 2 or 3 in the morning.
My abiding memory of the race week was that, first of all, about a week before, the smell of new cut grass.
We had the outside of the race course where all the families went with the Foxford rug
And we had tea and sandwiches, and there was a bar in the middle of the course, there was a tote in the middle of the course, and there was bookmakers in the middle of the course.
And it's all sheeting around it. And you'd kind of pull up the end of the sheet and prise open a little hole where you could slip in.
Because in the hole, it was called the hole. Where's the hole? Go around the back.
As soon as they nailed up on you, you'd open up and
And of course, everybody could see you coming in, but you thought you were sneaking in.
The thing about it is, one fella'd go in and he put his ear to the ground to see could he hear the horses come. It's a wonder he wasn't killed. Anyway, and if it was all clear then, we'd all run like rabbits.
I used to come home with pockets fulls of these tickets and have the results with me and check them all against the results.
And if there was an objection, that was real work. If there was an objection, because people would have thrown away their ticket, and you'd have a different result.
But the biggest treat for Race Week in Tramore, now Race Week in Tramore was huge. But our treat was the 15th of August, to be brought down to the end of Train Hill to see the people getting on the last train going into Waterford.
And those who missed it then, what are we going to do with them?
Even in the 50s, when the 1st of September would come, you'd think there'd been a gate closed below at the Middle Bridge. The town would get so quiet. It was unbelievable.
I became a widow when I was 32. I had 3 children. The eldest was 5 and the youngest was 3 months. So people say to me, how did you manage? And my answer to that is, with the help of friends and neighbours. They were fantastic.
People around my age who would have gone away, did what we would do, but always came back. I found it, to this day, like I've always said, I would never have stayed away. I'd always come back to Tramore.
The people that live in Tramore are very, very friendly people. They welcome in other people much more than other places. I think that's, to me, is what Tramore is about.